This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
A large segment of the American population believes that in order to save democracy, we have to kill it. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. This will be a little bit of a different program this evening as we've got some changes going on here. First of all, welcome to the program. If you are subscribing to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@GilbertHouse, please take a moment, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and then please download our free mobile app. That app will guarantee that we never get canceled by the gatekeepers of big tech because it's our app. And the content is stored by a Christian company, served up from them, and we will not be canceled by them. They show no interest in telling us what we can or can't say as long as we, don't do anything outrageous or illegal, which we don't plan to do. So you'll find that at gilberthouse.org/app, gilberthouse.org/app. You'll also find a link at the website for this program, VFTB.net. Now, the reason this is a little bit of a different program, it got crossed wires with a planned guest for this weekend, and so we weren't able to make connections for an interview this week. It's and in addition to that, Sharon and I can now announce that we are under contract for our next book. This is with Defender Publishing, and we are working on a book for the fourth quarter of this year, but we've got to get it turned in by March 15th. Manuscript has to be in at least 6 months out, 5 months out at minimum. And so we're kind of pushing it to get it out for late October, early November, just even with the March 15th deadline. So over the next 8 weeks or so, we need to crank out about 1,000 words a day. We're about 30,000 words in on the book right now, but in order to make sure we convey the idea we found, or the ideas we want to communicate, we think we probably need to be in the 75 to 100,000 word range. Anyway, bottom line is, for the next 6 weeks or so, I need to spend a lot more time writing than talking. And so it's a lot easier time-wise for me to just sit down in front of this camera, in front of this microphone, and just blather for a bit. The good news is that most of the show prep will have been done for the 5 and 10, during the preparations for the 5 and 10 daily news analyses for Skywatch TV. So thankfully, this will help. I can at least have some idea of what I'm going to talk about for Sunday evenings. And now I will say this, we will still continue with our monthly Iron and Myth Roundtable sessions. As you are watching this evening, assuming you're watching this on Sunday evening, I am talking with Dr. Judd Burton, Brian Godawa, and Pastor Doug Van Dorn for next weekend's program, which will be about portals. That should be fascinating. So we'll continue those. If other interview opportunities come up during the next couple of months, I may delay those until after March, until after we get the manuscript turned in. But if not, if it's something we can fit into the schedule easily, I'll do it. But hey, after what are we at? What are we on now? This is 14 years of doing this program. I've built up some content, and I do have a sociopathic need to tell people what I think anyway, which is why I do what I do. So this will be the topic of the discussion this weekend, and we will talk about the 2024 election cycle and what is coming up here. Try to do it delicately because the last program I got kicked off of social media, video streaming sites, had to do with an offhanded remark 3 years ago about the previous election. Didn't even make any claims. I just pointed out anomalies and just left it at that. And that was enough to get a strike on the channel. So we are not trying to deliberately lose our space on Mars Hill, which is why we do what we do here on YouTube. Otherwise, we just, say the heck with it, go to Rumble and just focus on that. But our point here is to try to share the hope that we have in Jesus Christ while also commenting on what's going on in the world around us. So again, we're going to stay on Mars Hill as long as we can get it, as long as we have an opportunity to. Oh, by the way, the hat tonight, this was a fellow who supplied these to us at Skywatch TV back, I want to say around 2016. And haven't worn it much. It's still really good condition. It's going to be hanging on the wall here in the barn soon, but it's another one of those days where wind chills outside are near zero, and so when walking Grace, the rescue dog, today, who has joined me here in the barn. Thank you for not disrupting the green screen, Grace. That was very good of you. That was very nice. Had to wear the hat outside, the knit hat, which really leaves you with some horrific hair. So anyway, maybe wearing more of these caps that I've collected over the years in the next few programs. Before we get to the politics, let's talk very quickly about what's going on in the Middle East, because things there have escalated, as you know by now. Earlier this week, Thursday, Iran seized an oil tanker. This was a tanker filled with Iraqi crude that was bound for Turkey, sailing under a Marshall Islands flag named the St. Nicholas, interestingly enough. This was in retaliation for the United States confiscating the very same ship a year ago when it was sailing under a different name, the Suez Rejan. And after that move a year ago, Iran warned that there would be consequences. Well, their seizure of the St. Nicholas appears to be those consequences. As of Friday, the ship was being directed back towards an Iranian port. Now, after that happened on Thursday, the U.S. Navy shot down about 24 missiles and drones fired from Yemen. And I know the corporate media continues to call them the Houthi rebels. The Houthi rebels. But the fact is the Houthis in Yemen, backed by Iran, control about 80% of the country's population. They control all the major urban centers, including the capital of Sana'a. So at some point, we're going to have to stop calling them the rebels and just call them the government of Yemen. The Yemenis are tough. They're like the Afghans. The Ottoman Empire tried for centuries to subdue the Yemenis and just could not do it. They finally gave up, just as Russia finally gave up trying to pacify Afghanistan. And after 20 years, the United States finally pulled out. We should have learned the lesson and pulled out as soon as it was clear that Osama bin Laden was not going to fall. That first big battle after the Taliban got spanked. And at that point, we should have just left. Because Afghanistan, as the old joke goes, is where empires go to die. Yemen appears to be another one of those countries with the added advantage for the Yemenis of having control over that Bab el-Mandeb Strait. That's that little choke point between the Gulf of Oman and the Red Sea. And about 10 to 12% of the world's trade flows through that strait on its way to the Suez Canal, because it's the shortcut to get from Asia and India to Europe and North America. Well, because the Yemenis have been so effective in defying the U.S. Navy and Operation Prosperity Guardian, most of the major carriers have decided to avoid the Red Sea and just avoid this problem altogether. So now they're sailing around the Horn of Africa, the southern tip of Africa. Now, that's not the Horn of Africa. The Horn of Africa is Somalia. The Cape of Good Hope is what I meant, the southern tip of Africa, which adds anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks to the shipping time. The cost of shipping cargo vessels, cargo containers from Asia to Europe has jumped by 300% in the last few weeks. So there will be an economic impact to all of this. In retaliation, the U.S. government Thursday night, along with the UK military, UK flying from Cyprus, the U.S. flying from the USS Eisenhower, struck some 60 targets in Yemen. Reporter for Voice of America said that the targets were more than 24, we now know as many as 60, ranging from training facilities to drone storage and production facilities. So this is escalating. What will Yemen do? They, of course, are talking tough. Will this turn into a direct confrontation between Iran? Now, President Biden said in an interview this weekend that we are not fighting a proxy war with Iran. Yeah, we pretty much are. There have been more than 100 attacks on U.S. military forces in Iraq and Syria since October 7th. Most of these are downplayed by the corporate media here in the United States, but quite a few American servicemen have been injured in these attacks, and these are from by Iran-backed militia units in Iraq. So, yes, we are fighting a proxy war against Iran. Now, one bit of news that came out Saturday that at least makes you smile. The Houthis apparently accidentally targeted a Russian oil tanker in the Red Sea. So, not sure of any damage or injuries, but this is something that is likely going to escalate. We're keeping an eye on this. We've already moved our Israel tour, and I'll talk about this after the break, but we've already moved our Israel tour back from spring to late fall, and we'll see if that's enough time. We may, in fact, have to move this all the way back to 2025 and just pray that things don't escalate any further. Speaking of Russia, by the way, Ukraine has essentially fallen off the front page. The Western media, the corporate media, has essentially admitted that Ukraine has lost this war and that there's no point for Ukraine in continuing it. There have been talks behind the scenes with Ukrainians trying to get them to the negotiating table. Their much vaunted, long anticipated summer counteroffensive regained less than 1% of the territory that Russia conquered or took when the war began last February. So there's nothing more to be gained at this point except by those who are selling weapons to the militaries involved. Certainly the Ukrainian people and the Russian people are not benefiting from this in any way. The Russian government, the Russian economy has not suffered the way it was anticipated. And sadly, we have to raise the question now at this point, what are we trying to preserve in Ukraine? Well, okay, we have to stop Putin because Putin's a bad guy. Okay. I get that Putin is a megalomaniac, and he may well be trying to put the old band back together, the Soviet Union. I foolishly thought that he was not going to attack back in last spring. I just thought he was not going to be interested in trying to govern a bunch of Ukrainian people who and there's a long history of animosity between the Ukrainians and the Russians. You go back to the 1930s and the fact that Stalin starved millions, literally millions of Ukrainians to death in the 1930s. And there are people who remember. So you can understand why Ukrainians don't have any desire, at least the western part of the country, don't have any desire to live under Russian rule. Eastern part of the country, the Donbass, predominantly Russians, ethnic Russians, Russian speakers, the same with the Crimean Peninsula, which Russia has controlled since 2014. It's the western part of the country that really rejects any Russian supervision. But militarily, there's really nothing Ukraine can do about it at this point. And some of the things that the Ukrainian government under Volodymyr Zelensky have done to try to improve their chances of winning just make you have to question, okay, what exactly are we trying to preserve there? For example, the Russian government is attempting to ban the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. The Ukrainian government is supposed to vote later this month to close down the country's biggest Christian denomination. 12,000 Ukrainian Orthodox Church parishes in the country. Government there has accused the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of having ties with the Russian Orthodox Church, even though the UOC has condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine and declared its autonomy from the Russian Orthodox Church. That said, the Security Service of Ukraine has opened more than 5 dozen criminal cases against priests in the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, sanctioned 17 of them, and revoked citizenship of 19 hierarchs. Hierarch is one of the ranking officials, similar to a bishop in Roman Catholic Church. Anyway, lawyers have written to government officials in Europe and the UK. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak received one of those. U.S. President Joe Biden, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, urging them to put pressure on Volodymyr Zelensky to suspend efforts to ban the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Again, the largest Christian denomination in Ukraine and the Ukrainian government, which we're supposed to be defending to protect democracy, which is sort of the theme of this week's program. They're trying to cancel the largest Christian denomination in the country in the interest of preserving their democracy. I mean, look, when an action is too evil, even for the European Union, for the European deep state, you know you've stepped over the line. Well, again, here in the United States, we are looking at an historic year. And I'm old enough to remember now that every single election, presidential election since, 1992, I guess, George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton, is the biggest, most important election of our lifetimes. We might not have a country after this election. I've been hearing that every year now for the last 30 plus years. This year might actually be true. I mean, after what we saw in 2020, this year may prove to be a real turning point in the history of the United States. I mean, it's like the old joke, who was it? Ernest Hemingway was asked how he went bankrupt. And his answer was something to the effect of gradually and then all at once. And I think that's sort of how we look at the seismic shift that's taking place in America in 2024. These changes, fundamental changes in the structure of this country, have been happening gradually for years, but I think we're about to hit a tipping point. Gradually and then all at once. We've seen since Donald Trump came, on the scene, really came on the scene, got serious about running for president in 2016, that the deep state is showing its hand now. It is now so desperate to keep Donald Trump and his supporters away from the White House that they're pretty much willing to do anything, tear up the Constitution, just violate the rule of law in order to make that happen. And again, I'm trying to be somewhat cautious about how I put this here, because I realize that you start asking questions like this or openly questioning how things are supposed to go, and you can wind up, that's just not in line with community standards. But we see this in the lawfare that is being waged against Donald Trump. It's not warfare, it's lawfare. The case, for example, in New York, Manhattan, District Attorney Alvin Bragg filing federal charges. No, he's a district attorney. He's a local attorney filing federal charges. You can't do that, except he did. The case in Washington, D.C., basically accusing President Trump of insurrection for doing exactly what Democrats did after the 2016 election. And in Fulton County, Georgia, now things have just really gone absolutely bizarre. We learned this past week that the district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia, Fannie Willis, improperly, and this is according to a court motion filed this past Monday, improperly hired an alleged lover, a married man, private attorney, to prosecute Trump and his co-conspirators, co-defendants, let's put it that way. And not only did she hire this guy, she financially benefited from the arrangement. According to the court motion, which argues that the charges against one of Trump's staff members during the 2020 election are unconstitutional, the filing alleges that Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade, who's a private attorney, paid for some rather fancy vacations that he took with Ms. Willis when he was still married, using money that he received from the taxpayers of Fulton County, Georgia. His work on this case, which began in the spring of 2022, has He has billed the county some $650,000 at this point. And of course, District Attorney Willis approves those payments. What's really interesting is that Wade is being paid above the going rate for special prosecutors, reportedly. And this is odd because he has no experience in trying RICO cases. These are the racketeering charges that have been brought against Trump and his co-defendants. Very little experience in trying felony cases of any kind. And yet he's getting paid a premium, and then that money is being turned back around as he's not surprisingly in the middle of a divorce case right now. Nathan Wade taking that money and turning around and taking Fannie Willis on very expensive vacations. This is being widely reported by the corporate media, but the irony here is that the district attorney in Fulton County may have just blown her case against Donald Trump apart because she wanted to give her, what's the word, her boo a job. Absolutely cannot make this stuff up. And while all of this is going on, dozens of Democratic members of Congress are trying to disqualify up to 126 Republican colleagues. But bear in mind, there's only 435 representatives in Congress. So more than a quarter of them are according to reports, could be disqualified if Democrats get their way. I don't think they will, but I think it's telling that Democrats in Congress want to disqualify Republican colleagues under the theory that the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution gives them the power to bar anyone who is linked to insurrection. And of course, that would be not just January 6th, the protest at the U.S. Capitol. This would be anyone who dared question the result of the 2020 election. And again, the irony here is that some of the members who are arguing for this, like Jamie Raskin of Maryland, was very vocal about his opinion of the results of the 2016 election. Or Benny Thompson, who was the chairman of the January 6th committee. It's again, you cannot make this stuff up. And the corporate media is gaslighting us into thinking that all of this is normal. That this is just normal. This is the Department of Justice here and the legal process in the United States under constitutional guidelines just moving the way it's supposed to. Now, there is nothing normal about this, for Americans anyway. I mean, we were raised to believe, at least I was, again, I'm old enough to remember, Superman, George Reeves, Truth, Justice, and the American Way, where any kid could grow up to be president, and that was one of the most important and highest honors that you could receive in this life. And now at the age of 62, I'm looking at this like, first of all, I don't want that job. Secondly, it's not really that honorable anymore because as we've learned from the revelations, number one, as you get older, you get a little wiser. But secondly, just things that we've learned over the last 6-7 years, just watching the political process unfold here in the United States. There is a deep state that is willing to do anything to hang on to power and keep people out of power that they don't want, which is basically you and me, constituency. We are not their actual constituents. Their actual constituents are the ones who write the checks, and that's not most of us. So anyway, and of course, the irony of all of this is that by trying to disenfranchise tens of millions of Republican voters around the country, Democrats think they are saving democracy. Liberals think they are saving democracy by putting a spike in the democratic process. Now, I understand. We live in a representative republic, or at least that's how it was originally defined. This is not a democracy. The framers of the Constitution did that deliberately because democracy is mob rule. But this really isn't a true representative republic anymore. We were never supposed to, in the original intention, we were never supposed to vote directly for senators. Okay? That was part of the representation process. You vote for a local representative, and then your state representatives would vote for the senators to represent you in the upper chamber. Anyway, So it is really not what the framers intended. It is what the deep state wants. And that's not really a surprise. Remember when Jesus was being tempted in the wilderness, he was taken up a very high mountain, which can only have been Mount Hermon. It's 3 times higher than any mountain anywhere near Israel, and shown all the kingdoms of the world. Satan said, these are all mine. I can give them to whoever I want. And I don't recall anywhere in the New Testament where Jesus says, yes, except for those representative republics that are still coming. Well, yeah, Rome was a representative republic. It served Jupiter, who was just Satan by a different name. I mean, literally. When Jesus was accused of casting out demons by the power of Beelzebul, which means Baal, the prince, Baal was just the storm god in the Canaanite pantheon, the king of their pantheon. He was the same entity worshipped by the Romans as Jupiter, the Greeks as Zeus, and other pantheons by different names. Is it a surprise to you, as I wrote in my book, The Second Coming of Saturn, that the place where our legislature meets, the United States Congress, is called the Capitol because that's the name of the temple of Jupiter in Rome, the Capitolium? True. Thomas Jefferson insisted on that. Now, was he a Satanist? No, I don't think so. I think he just wanted to evoke the glory of the Roman Republic. But my point is this: Satan controls all the governments of the world for now, within limits. We Christians are behind enemy lines, and we have been since day one, when Jesus declared his divinity at the base of Mount Hermon. So we just need to accept that we are fighting guerrilla war in the supernatural sense, a spiritual sense. We're not going to take the 7 mountains of civilization. We are not going to vote Jesus into the White House or get him put on the Supreme Court. We should vote, participate in the process, but again, just understand we're fighting a holding action, buying time to share the hope that we have in Jesus Christ with our friends, our family members, our colleagues, co-workers. Get them off the battlefield, get the wounded behind our lines, and wait for the cavalry to arrive in the heavenlies. Jesus at the head of a heavenly army. So, yeah, the more proof that liberals think that we need to save democracy by killing it. A senior editor for Bloomberg Opinion, corporate media, named for Michael Bloomberg, founder. Bloomberg Opinion, Tobin Harshaw, senior editor for Bloomberg Opinion, wrote an op-ed piece this past week. And he argues in this article, this op-ed, that people voting is a threat to democracy. Yeah, I'm not exaggerating. He wrote that 41% of the world's population is having major elections this year. A lot of election cycles coinciding. 40% of the world's population having elections this year. Yay, democracy, right? Quoting again from his article. Not really. What with extremely extremist populist parties, mostly right-wing, on the rise everywhere from the European Union to the Pacific Rim. So what Harshaw is saying is that it's a bad thing because there's a 90% chance people won't vote the way he thinks we should vote. So voting is thus a bad thing. Again, pure democracy, mob rule could, be a threat to the principle of individual liberty? Starting to sound like a conservative, Mr. Harshaw. Maybe you think government should have a system of checks and balances, like an upper chamber in the legislature to cool the temperature of the lower chamber, like Senate and House of Representatives, or maybe that the executive branch should answer to the legislature and to the judiciary, or maybe a federalist system where the power of the central government is checked by the power of state and local governments. Maybe that would be a good thing. That's not quite what he means. What he means is people shouldn't be allowed to vote because they'll vote the wrong way. So voting is bad. And that's what we're seeing here with Democrats. Let's kick Republicans off the ballot. Let's keep Trump off the ballot. And, oh, yes, we got that representative in New York City who basically said we need more migrants coming in for redistricting purposes, because presumably they'll vote Democrat. This is why we've got a problem at the southern border. I don't see any other real reason to allow millions of undocumented, we used to call them illegal aliens. I guess that's not a politically correct term anymore. Undocumented migrants, illegal migrants, whatever. There was a new term I heard the other day that was really interesting. Politically correct. Unconventional migrants, something to that effect. Anyway, bottom line is they're crossing the border, not at the normal checkpoints. They're encountering Customs and Border Protection because they know that CBP is just going to allow them into the country. What really is disturbing is that, and I was talking about this back in 2006 when I was hosting a daily secular political talk radio show, your typical conservative talk radio station. You know, I preceded Sean Hannity. I followed Bill O'Reilly, who was still doing a daily talk show at the time. Who else do we have on the show, on the program? Michael Savage was our evening, So a couple of local programs with nationally syndicated conservative hosts. And I was one of the guys. I was program director of the radio station. This was Eagle 93.9 in Columbia, Missouri. Gary Nolan is now hosting that program and basically has been there since I left back in 2007. So good on Gary for recognizing that Columbia is a decent place to live and a good company to work for. Anyway, back in 2006 and 2007, I was talking to representatives of Customs and Border Protection, Border Patrol, and they were disturbed by the number of what they called OTMs crossing the border then. Now, remember, that was the George W. Bush administration. OTM stands for other than Mexicans. I mean, we can understand if people from the next door country or even 2 or 3 countries away coming up from Central America want to come to the United States, land of opportunity, do better financially. I mean, let's be honest, I wouldn't be here if I hadn't had ancestors from places like Germany and Wales and Sweden, 140, 160, in one case, going on 400 years ago, come to this country for that very reason. But coming through ports of entry and doing so, legally, one case guy came as an indentured servant, but, privilege because anyway, we'll talk about that more in just a sec. But what really is bizarre is that in 2021, we started to see a surge in the number of Asian nationals and African nationals crossing the border. And we learned, thanks to the Daily Caller this past week, that the Chinese now have a streamlined process for getting into the country. Last April, there was an email sent by Customs and Border Protection to officials around the country, about 500 Border Patrol agents, instructing them to reduce the number of interview questions given to Chinese nationals encountered by Customs and Border Protection, reducing the number of questions, things like, what's your name? Where are you from? Why are you here? What did you used to do? Do you have any connections to the Chinese Communist Party? Military experience, intelligence, or, what are you going to do? Where are you going? That kind of thing. There were 40 questions that had to be asked until April of 2023, at which time that list was reduced to 5. From 40 to 5. Now, if the reduction was to streamline the process by which Customs and Border Protection could eject Chinese nationals who had crossed the border illegally, send them back into Mexico, that would be fine. I mean, clearly they're not asylum seekers. They got from China to Central America without a problem. So why are they trying to cross the border that way instead of getting a visa and landing at LAX? Because they don't want to. And of course, the process was not streamlined to make it easier and faster to turn them around and send them back across the border. It was so that they could be processed and released onto the streets of the United States with a note to appear at an asylum hearing 3 years in the future. Of course, 80% of them will not show up, according to statistics. Why is this relevant? Well, because China is our main geopolitical rival in the world right now. And we've seen some 35,000 of them cross the border since Joe Biden became president. 35,000 that are now who knows where inside these United States. And this isn't even getting into why are African nationals crossing the border. They didn't walk to Brazil from Ghana or whatever. They flew to South America and then walked up from there, or flew to Mexico and walked up from there. Why are we allowing it? It is absolutely insane. I can only think of two reasons. Number one is political. Number two is perhaps economic. And that is simply because we in the Northern Hemisphere, people of European ancestry, just are not having enough children to maintain the population anymore. And it's hard to grow the economy, especially a consumer-based economy, when the number of consumers is aging and declining. This is not unique to Russia, Europe, and North America. It's also a problem for the Chinese, for the Japanese, for the Koreans, Singaporeans, Vietnamese, basically everything except the Southern Hemisphere at this point is shrinking in population. And demographers, contrary to what we have been taught, that we're about to overrun the carrying capacity of planet Earth and starve to death, demographers now say that by about 2060, the population on Earth will plateau and begin to drop. And lest you think that's a good thing, just remember that as the population declines, it ages. It declines because more people are dying than are being born. And there are those who believe, demographers, professionals who look at these statistics for a living, who think that once that process begins, it may never turn around. So come quickly, Lord Jesus. But anyway, why allow migrants across the border? Because you need people to buy stuff to keep the economy going, I guess, and to vote the way we want them to, so that we can preserve our democracy by putting our thumb on the scale of democracy or something. And of course, the other reason here for killing democracy is privilege, because the whole idea of the United States was founded by old white guys, and we are apparently the problem. This made clear by the chief diversity officer at Johns Hopkins Medicine this past week. Johns Hopkins, one of the most prestigious institutions of higher learning here in the United States and worldwide. The chief diversity officer sent out a monthly diversity digest email to staff, along with a letter that declared all white people, Christians, and men privileged. Dr. Sharita Hill Golden, the chief diversity officer for the hospital system at Johns Hopkins, included heterosexuals, the able-bodied, and those who speak English in the privileged category. This list includes, let's see, running down the whole list: white people, able-bodied people, heterosexuals, cisgender people, if you identify or just acknowledge the reality of your biology, apparently, cisgender people, males, Christians, middle or owning class people. Owning class. If you have a mortgage, apparently, you are privileged, middle-aged people, and English-speaking people. In other words, if you want a definition for privileged, just look at this picture. You are seeing the face of privilege right now on your video screen. White, middle-aged, English-speaking, able-bodied, more or less, Christian, did I leave any else? Oh, cisgender, heterosexual, etc. I am the embodiment of, I check every one of those boxes. Sweet. Winning. Well, obviously this generated pushback once the email got out, as these things are wont to do. Academics live in a bubble where they don't realize how out of step with reality they truly are. So once she realized that she had really stepped in it, and that most of the normies out here in flyover country were not amused. She sent out an apology, retracted her definition of privilege. That was about a day and a half after she sent the original email. Well, God bless her, but She is not the most extreme example of this. She is just an example of the symptom of this illness that is spread through our society. Academia is the delivery mechanism for this toxin that has influenced our society. It is based on the idea that there are two classes of people: oppressors and oppressed. It is based on Marxism, just pure and simple. It is Marxism. And all diversity, equity, and inclusion has done is substitute race for economic class. The irony of this worldview, whether you're looking at race or economic class, is that the response for the oppressed is to rise up and throw off their chains. But when they do that, then by definition, they become the new oppressor class, and a whole new class of oppressed people then have to rise up and throw them off. It is not a stable system, which is the intention. It has no logical basis. It is based strictly on feels and driving a wedge between people, stoking hatred. It is based on chaos. This is the spirit of Leviathan, and I don't mean that figuratively. This is what it is intended to do: stir people up and get us angry at one another. Frankly, I laugh at this. I mean, yes, we've got a nice 30 by 40 foot building here that we were able to, for a reasonably low figure, convert into a place where we can work. But we live in a manufactured home. We've got two vehicles. One's a 2005, one's a 2007. Between them, they've got like 360,000 miles on them. So, it's only been late in life, as I entered middle age, that I actually started getting out of debt. So, again, if that's what privilege means to Dr. Golden, well, bless her pointy little head. I would use that as the story, except I got another bless your pointy little head coming after the break. One final note, and this is disturbing, but it needs to be brought to your attention because it is the world in which we live. For the fifth consecutive year, the number one cause of death worldwide is abortion. This is according to Worldometer, which is a website that tracks health, population, other metrics in real time. 44.6 million abortions performed worldwide in 2023. That exceeds the combined number of casualties caused by all other leading causes of death listed. In other words, far more than cancer, smoking, drunk driving, communicable diseases. Abortion is far and away the number one cause of death. But the corporate media won't count it because to them it's just a clump of cells. It's not an unborn child who's being terminated. But again, fifth consecutive year, number one cause of death worldwide. What is interesting, however, is that one of the world's most widely read women's magazines, Cosmopolitan, still around after all these years, inadvertently said the quiet part out loud, admitted that abortion is satanic. They ran an article in their November-December issue, and this is worth noting because Cosmo has a readership of its print and digital editions that is about 50 million readers. This piece was about the Satanic Temple and its telehealth abortion clinic in New Mexico. They call it Samuel Alito's Mom's Abortion Center because Justice Samuel Alito wrote the majority opinion in the Supreme Court decision that struck down Roe versus Wade, which was a bad decision. I mean, even attorneys I've spoken to over the years who are pro-abortion admit that the ruling was horrible. If you're ruling based on what's actually in the Constitution, there is nothing in there that justified the ruling back in the Roe v. Wade case. So returning this to the states was the right decision by this court. Satanic Temple has proven itself to be absolutely brilliant in marketing and getting attention for itself. And I recognize the irony that I'm giving them attention here, but I think it's even more ironic that Cosmopolitan, in the in its attempt to be, snarky and cutting edgy, assuming that its readership is mostly pro-abortion, which is probably true, writer Ariel Daum wrote that the clinic draws inspiration from landmark court rulings in favor of Christian business owners denying services to LGBT people purely on religious grounds. And it uses this as a basis for justifying the Satanic Temple's ritual of abortion. Goes on to call the Satanic Temple a faith-based group and states that the Satanic Temple, and by extension Satanism, is a religion. Now, I don't know if this is what Cosmopolitan intended to do, but unironically, it has reinforced the truth, which is that abortion is satanic. And I might just suggest to you that if you find yourself on the same side of any issue as the Satanists, you might need to rethink your position. Coming up, we will talk about our upcoming trip to Israel and the possibility that we have to move dates. We're still looking at that. As of now, still have not changed those. A new conference or two to tell you about. And my kind of town, my hometown of Chicago. That's where we find the pointy little heads to discuss this week as A View from the Bunker continues.
Sharon and I really appreciate your support, and that's why every single month we want to make a special offer available to you at the Gilbert House store. And now that we're into the holidays, we're offering extra specials.
We really are. Last year we had some holiday specials that people just really enjoyed getting. Lots and lots of you went and ordered there, and we thank you for that. We're doing the same thing this year. Lots of great deals, including Red Wing Saga specials, Derek's book specials, and blowout prices on all of our DVDs.
Yes, but if you prefer streaming video, so you get instant access in full HD.
And no shipping.
And no shipping, right. We've got special discounts available now at our online streaming site, gilberthouse.org/video. That includes even our full-length travelogumentaries, our Wars of the Gods Volume 1 and Volume 2, now at a special discounted price through the end of January.
That is such a deal. And by the way, those of you who have loved Vicki Joy Anderson's book, They Only Come Out at Night, that book is also on special December and January.
We want to make this information available to you. We understand that around the holidays, finances get a little tight, so we're offering special pricing on just about everything in our online store. We're all in the middle of a battlefield.
We are.
And we all need good information. Please take advantage of our special offers, gilberthouse.org/video and gilberthouse.org/store. And thank you for your prayers and support.
Amen.
Walking the walk every Sunday night from the beautiful Missouri Ozarks. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. You'll find us online, VFTB.net, gilberthouse.org, derekpgilbert.com. Those are the websites. Of course, on social media, Twitter @ViewFromBunker. It's now X, actually. My X account, my personal X account, which is the more active one, @DerekGilbert. Facebook, View from the Bunker. And, of course, the news social media sites, Truth Social, Gab Me We Getter, @Derek P. Gilbert. Also have a Threads account, but meh. Anyway, social media. Yes, YouTube, youtube.com @Gilbert House. And again, just a reminder, once you subscribe, please take a moment and download our free mobile app. We've been downloading and uploading archives from our programs. I mean, PID Radio goes back to 2005. We're coming up on our 19th anniversary on PID Radio. I mean, we were back in the day when Apple was begging people to submit to the iTunes podcast store. That's how early we were. Less than 6 months after the Podfather Adam Curry and Dave Weiner developed the code for syndicating RSS feeds for podcasts. That's how early we were, and some of those early programs are now available on the Gilbert House app. You find it for iOS, Android, and Amazon Kindle Fire phones and tablets. Our first interviews with the likes of Dr. Michael Heiser, Tom Horn, L.A. Marzulli, interviews with folks like Chuck Missler, the late Russ Dizdar, Rob Skiba, many others, all there now under PID Radio Classic View from the Bunker, and again, gilberthouse.org/app, or look for the link in the menu bar at vftb.net. I was born and raised in Chicago. I must confess, I'm still a fan of most of the Chicago sports teams. I don't live and die by professional sports, but I still root for the Cubs, Sox, Bulls, Bears. Lost interest in ice hockey years ago, but I was a big fan of the Blackhawks back in the day, back in the Bobby Hull, Dennis Hull days. Yeah, Tony Esposito, Eric Nestorenko, Keith Magnuson. Yeah, guys like that. Whitey Stapleton, Jim Pappin. Yeah, but not so much these days, which is too bad because I wasn't really following the Blackhawks when they finally won the Stanley Cup. But anyway, but I am a product of the elementary school system in Chicago. I graduated from Chicago Public Schools 1976. This was before the big shift in technology. We actually had to read paper books. A lot of our tests were printed out on mimeograph machines. You remember that? You had to hand crank them. They smelled wonderful. Stuff like that. But now you can't teach, apparently, without handing out laptops and tablets to students. And sadly, in Chicago, this has turned out to be a very difficult line item in the budget for the Chicago public school system. According to a report from Chicago media, tens of millions of dollars worth of tech devices were lost or stolen in 2022, and I'm quoting now from the report, without appropriate search and recovery efforts, end quote. Now, you'd think that the Chicago public school system would pay attention to this. It's more difficult to indoctrinate children into left-wing Marxist ideology if they don't have the technology to connect, to the teachers. But it is what it is. Fiscal year 2023's annual report, released on Tuesday this week, stated that Chicago public schools reported 77,505 tech devices lost or stolen during the 2021-2022 school year, valued at over $23 million in the original purchase price. $23 million worth of tablets and laptops, and not just tablets and laptops. According to this, the missing items included laptops, iPads, Wi-Fi hotspots, printers, document cameras, and interactive whiteboards. Stuff that just went missing. Now, they discovered all this as they did their first post-COVID-19 inventory. The report calls the numbers unacceptably high. Yeah, you think? It says the oversight process is in need of a serious overhaul. Now, look, I remember back in the day, if we had done anything like that in our school, and, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm privileged, but I just know that we would have been punished somehow. But apparently, again, without appropriate search and recovery efforts, $23 million in taxpayer money gone as these iPads, laptops, Wi-Fi routers, printers, document scanners just disappeared. At 36 schools, according to the report, at 36 schools, 100% of the tech devices assigned specifically to students were marked lost or stolen. 36 schools, every single device handed out to kids, gone. Yeah, what can you say? Without appropriate search and recovery efforts. Is Chicago public school system just like, well, the kids deserve the stuff? In one case, the report found that a sister and brother at one of the schools, between the two of them, lost 10 devices in 1 year. Now, look, economically speaking, I can understand the temptation if family's having a tough time, mom and dad really need, hey, okay, you hock the iPad and then tell the kid to tell the teacher they lost it. All right, I understand that. But my goodness, 100% of the devices at 36 schools in Chicago, all of them just gone. We weren't allowed to keep the textbooks, okay? Much less the iPads. And because I graduated in 1976, being middle-aged, I'm privileged, didn't even have the opportunity to swipe a ColecoVision. No word as to how policies in the Chicago public school system will change going forward. We say to the administration there, bless your pointy little heads. Skywatch TV's virtual conference, Confronting the Darkness, coming up in just about 2 months. There will be a program airing on Skywatch TV at the end of January with details on that. Keep an eye on defenderconference.com. I will have a presentation in there for that. So will Sharon, actually. She's going to do one called The Armageddon Strain, which is the title of a novel she wrote back in 2003, which suddenly became very, very relevant in 2020. She let me borrow plot points for my novel, The God Conspiracy. If you read The God Conspiracy and know what was going on there, you'll get it. Anyway, some top-notch speakers putting together presentations for Skywatch TV's spring virtual conference, and information forthcoming at defenderconference.com. April 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, the Prophetic Signs in the Heavenlies Conference in Dallas, the Hilton DFW Lakes Conference Center. That's Grapevine, Texas, very close to the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. Registration just $35 for that conference. Paul Begley, Colonel David Giammona, Pastor Casper McLeod, David Hebner, Dr. Carrie Mayday will be there. Dave Hodges, Michael Bodea, Tov Rose, look forward to meeting him. John Moore, David Paxton, Doug Thornton, look forward to meeting him as well. And, of course, the total eclipse of the sun, hence the name of the conference, Prophetic Signs in the Heavenlies. Total eclipse of the sun on Monday, April 8th. So if you can join us there and hang around for an extra day, we'll all watch the sun go dark together. That will be fantastic. And by the way, good news to report on Mike Kerr. If you've been watching his story on Facebook at all, you know that Mike Kerr went into the hospital on my birthday, actually, a week ago, Friday, January 5th, and underwent a procedure to remove a blockage. But when they removed that one, they found 7 others. So he underwent a triple bypass in Idaho Falls and is now recovering. So continue to pray for Mike Kerr's complete recovery. We look forward to seeing him and you in Dallas. More information and registration at hearthewatchmen.com, hearthewatchmen.com. In June, we'll be in Sparta, Missouri. That's just south of Springfield at the His Call Ministries location, the Finley River Ranch, the Glory Barn there, Alec and Ginny Wade, wonderful couple. Sharon and I will be speaking Friday night, Saturday, and then Sunday morning. It's just the two of us, so you can join us for the weekend. They do have some space there if you want to stay for the weekend. But you do want to get in touch. You do want to get in touch with them in advance to make sure they've also got some space if you want to camp. And you can find out more about that at their website, which is hiscallministries.com. Again, that's June 21, 22, and 23. 21st through the 23rd of June, 2024. Sharon and me, the Finley River Ranch at His Call Ministries. In July, we'll be at the Go Therefore Conference. Quite a lineup this year. This is at the Harvest Revival Center. Again, a wonderful facility. Pastor Neil Peterson, his church in Brookville, Ohio. I got it right this year. Last year I kept saying Brookline. There is no Brookline, Ohio. Brookville, Ohio, suburban Dayton, July 26th and 27th. We'll be there with L.A. Marzulli, Dr. Michael Lake, Dr. Gregory Reed, Dr. Judd Burton, Pastor Carl Gallups, Pastor Paul Begley, and, of course, Dr. Mike Spalding, who is coordinating it all. We hope you join us there. Streaming video is available. You can find out all about that at gothereforeconference.com. In fact, I think Mike is offering a deal where if you register for the conference, you get access to the streaming video from 2 previous conferences. But all of that's at gothereforeconference.com. And early days to talk about this. Don't have all the information on this yet, but I've been invited to speak at the Nephilim Anthropology Conference in Scotland last weekend in October. Sharon and I planning to do this, the Nephilim Anthropology Conference. In fact, we were asked to go last October, but I'd already agreed to speak for the Pitchfork and Hoe gathering in Valley City, North Dakota. And I'm glad I did. Wonderful time there. And we may be back in North Dakota later this year. That's also in the works. But anyway, this will be the last weekend in October, possibly near Glasgow, Isle of Bute, I think, B-U-T-E. But as information becomes available, I will let you know about that. The Nephilim Anthropology Conference in late October. If our tour stands as scheduled, November 3rd through 12th of 2024, we will fly to Tel Aviv and go to Israel directly from Scotland. But a lot depends on whether things escalate in the Middle East. And friends on the ground, friends serving in the IDF reserves, but still, hearing things suggest that this conflict between Israel and Hamas will continue for some time yet. And of course, then there's the question as to whether will Hezbollah get involved, and if that happens, they're much better armed and equipped and trained than Hamas, so that could really just pray that that doesn't happen. I mean, Iran does not want to lose its proxies in the Middle East, but it's a religion. It's not a political thing. This is a religion, and sometimes the spiritual forces take over. So we will see. Anyway, as of now, special guest Timothy Albarino joining us in Israel November 3rd through 12th. Here's the other thing. We didn't even, well, Sharon did. I wasn't paying attention. This overlaps with the federal elections here in the United States. That's November 5th of 2024. So I believe that's the date. I'm going to check the calendar now to make sure I'm not misspeaking. Anyway, yes, we know you can vote absentee. You can vote early in some states. Election day, yes, is November 5th of 2024. But we've talked to some folks who are not comfortable with that idea, given what has happened here in the past. Also, the possibility of some fiery but mostly peaceful protests. We'll see. We are still debating this, and we will let you know here on our app and online as soon as a decision is reached. Again, a lot of it is going to depend on what actually happens with the conflict as a wider conflict in Israel. But you'll find the latest information always at gilbertsinisrael.com, gilbertsinisrael.com. Thank you for allowing me to blather in your ear for the last hour or so. Appreciate you taking the time to do so. If you're listening on audio and subscribing to the podcast, please do so. Or if you haven't yet, please do so. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Pandora, or wherever fine podcasts are sold. Our announcer is the inimitable D.C. Good, and A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House Ministries, released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. And good night, Oliver, wherever you are. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.